Hello! Today's stories come from r/Malicious Compliance. I've got 3 stories of scholastic themed malicious compliance that were both sweet and hilarious. First up, Malicious Compliance from Students, a compilation. I am an educator and have worked on the area for about 10 years. And every time I read or listen to some of these stories, I end up thinking about something a student has done that fits the sub, but is super short, so it would not be worth posting. So here are some of the best I have ever dealt with. Number 1, no running in the library. One day, I was leaving for lunch break and saw some students bolting down into the library as fast as I could. Seeing that, I shouted, "Hey, you guys, you know you're not allowed to run in the library," which causes them to stop, look at me, and start hopping. Because I only told them they are not allowed to run, but who said anything about hopping? This is one of the times in my career in which I just take the loss and move on. Number 2, you should ask John if you're allowed to do it. After lunch, students have a small recess and may go play, as long as a teacher is around, but we always have the issue of students just seeing somewhere empty, like the soccer field or one of the courts, and start playing there. To try and avoid this, we established that students might go anywhere their teachers allow them to do it, but a group of students, trying to be smart, asked if I could allow them to go to the soccer field, which I couldn't, I was covering somewhere else. I just tell them, "You should ask John, he should be here soon enough." They called for John and ran a bit, so I just think that was good timing from the teacher. But no, I see them asking a student called John if they could go, which he promptly said, "Yes, you are all allowed, my dear students." The worst part is that I couldn't laugh because, smart as that was, I had to make them follow the rules. Number 3, you cannot use your pencil cases for this activity. I think most of you know where this may go, but I think it's funny. We do not allow the students to use their pencil cases for some activities, since we have our own classroom material, and pencil cases can be super distracting when students start showing off their brand new sparkly pen that smells like angel hair. Thing is, we didn't account for the incredible ability from students to find loopholes. I kid you not, I watched as they start passing around pencil cases because we never said anything about using our colleagues' pencil cases. Which, fair enough, but come on, help a teacher here. Number 4, you need to get a book that has paragraphs. To help with their reading, we give students the task to get a book and read it until the end, updating a reading journal once a week. Thing is, students tend to get super lazy with it and try to just go for a book like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Captain Underpants. So we established that it needs to be a book with paragraphs, aka something like a shorter novel. One of the students got a cooking book, and when we tried to stop him, he opened the book to one of the instructions for a recipe and said, with the most innocent voice, "See? Paragraphs." Number 5, you need to sit with your classmates. This might be my favorite. Since we came back full time after kids got vaccinated, the school has been demanding some really weird rules and is super inconsistent. One of those is that in the cafeteria, they are only allowed to sit with their classmates, which can be more safe, but at the same time, we have 100 plus students there at a time. So what's the difference? I was even trying to justify it to them, but they noticed I didn't believe in it myself, so they found a loophole. Because that's what fifth graders do, and just push the tables together. Each table had a different ground, so they didn't break any rules while still being able to be with their friends. I'm drawing a blank here, so if I remember any new stuff and this is liked enough, I might ask my colleagues for more stories. I love my students and love being a teacher. Now, this sounds like a great teacher who really cares. When the compliance was clever and not consequential, they laughed along with the kids. There was another really great mini story in the comments that I wanted to add. My dog farts shared this story. There was a kid at the school I teach at, about 10 to 12 years ago, had long hair. Principal had it out for the kid. Skater boy, big pants, etc. Anyway, I'm in the hall with the principal between classes. Kid walks by and principal goes off on him. Tells him the school handbook, says hair can't touch the collar. Kid just looks at him. Principal tells him he can't come back to school until his hair is off his collar. Kid nods and walks off. Bell rings. I go to class. Principal goes off muttering about kids. Next day, standing in the hall again with principal, kid walks by. Shaved head, except about an inch-wide strip above his forehead that he combed down straight. Reached a little past his nose. Principal starts to say something. Kid looks at him and says, "It's not touching my collar, sir." Kid walks on. I see the look on the principal's face and I go to my class where I proceed to laugh for most of the first block. I see the kid later and just say, "Awesome, man," and walk on. Eighth grader for reference. Next up, I can't drive anywhere without permission? Okay, I'll follow that rule. Maliciously. This happened when I was 16 years old and just got my driver's license. My parents had me run to the store to pick up some groceries. I stopped by my friend's house on the way back home for maybe 5 minutes to show him I got my license, and I was out driving alone. It was a really fun moment in the life of a 16-year-old. My stepmom, Marianne, freaked out. "We did not give you permission to drive to Bill's house. We told you to go to the store, and that is all." I told Marianne and my dad that they had let me drive to Matt's house the day before, so I didn't think it was a big deal. They went unreasonable and laid down the unbendable rule that set up the malicious compliance. You are not allowed to drive anywhere we do not give explicit permission for you to drive. Period. End of sentence. Just because you were allowed to do it previously does not ever give you permission another time. Ever. Fast forward 3 days later, my 13-year-old stepsister has been a jerk to me all day, and I'm sick of her BS. She goes quiet for about 30 minutes and then comes out all sticky sweet. "Hey, Brian, it's time to take me to ballet." I've taken her to ballet 3 days a week since I got my license. It's basically one of my chores. But I see my opportunity to say, "Screw you," to all three of them at once. "Sorry, Tina, I'm not allowed to take you to ballet. The parents didn't tell me to take you, and I don't want to get in trouble." She screams, she cries, she begs, she threatens. She calls her mom and leaves a message. She calls my dad and leaves a message. Just like Steve Miller says, time keeps on slipping into the future. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to hang on to the bitter end and actually go through with it. I'm shaking, but I know I've got them dead to rights. No call back from the parents, and the clock goes on past the start of her class. Stepmom comes home, and Tina runs to meet her. "Tina, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at ballet." I hear Tina tell her rendition of the story, leaving out how miserable she had been, and they go back and forth. Marianne comes pounding down the hall and yells, as God is my witness, "You just wait till your father gets home." I had to stifle a laugh because I never really believed people actually said that. An hour later, Dad comes home, and the two of them go running out to meet him and tell him how horrible I was. I wait in my room for the hammer to fall. About 10 minutes later, my dad calls down the hall. "Brian, would you please come here and talk to us?" "Well, Brian, you did it." "What do you mean, Dad?" "Got us all, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. Okay, let's make this reasonable for everyone." And they did. They agreed that they were over the top. They recognized that Tina isn't always very nice to me, and they spoke to her about that. I was allowed to have reasonable freedom if I was driving somewhere, since I had good grades and had never been in trouble. I walked down the hall back to my room, my back to my parents, with the world's biggest grin on my face. Haha, I'm so glad the dad realized they overreacted and took the L. Standing on principle over authority is always the way to go with loved ones and friends, in my opinion. There were some great comments on this one. Jealous Lychee 3309 said, "I was kind of hoping the story was that they specifically told you to go to the store but didn't specify that you were to come back home, so you sat in the store parking lot for hours." Super Bias responded, "That sounds like the escalation, the logical next step." Techno shared their experience. "The battle in my house was over passengers. I could go out for a drive anytime I liked so long as I was home on time and that I wasn't driving around with people I hadn't told my parents about. She was strict about it too. I once got grounded for driving my coworker home when her car wouldn't start. Then we had a power outage and both my brother and I slept late. As I'm eating breakfast in an attempt to make myself late enough to miss all of first period, I get an idea. My brother always took the bus to hang out with his friends, and being driven around by your embarrassing older brother is so not cool. So mom didn't know I'd be driving him. So I say, "Hey bro, you want to stay home today?" My brother says, "Sure, but mom will kill me." I say, "Nah, she'll blame me, just you wait." So I call mom's work, voicemail. She's on another call. I ring my stepdad's. He's out and can't be reached. Great. So I say, "It's done, bro. Go back to bed if you want. I gotta leave or I'll be late for second period. Just don't answer the phone." That night at dinner was tense. Mom wanted to know why I didn't drive bro in. though she framed it as, "I know you're not his keeper, but." I out and out admitted to telling him to go back to bed. My mom was all, "Why would you do that?" And I said I couldn't reach you for permission to drive him, and he looked tired. The look on her face was scary. She said, "He's your brother. He's not some random person I don't know." So I said, "You know all my friends and coworkers, and I can't drive them either." I was expecting to be told I was grounded, but instead she just sort of sputtered for a second before telling me we'd have to discuss this later. Never actually did, but she also never reamed me out for driving home coworkers or teammates again. And on to our third. You want to see all children not in school uniform? Okay. A few years ago, I retired from teaching in the UK, and I particularly love the stories of malicious compliance from schools and colleges. The recent threads about malicious compliance by students, which teachers had to take on the chin, brought back many memories, so I thought I'd share one, which involved me and my students, and which happened in my first year of teaching, 1981. I was fresh out of college and went to teach science in a secondary school, ages 11 to 16, in a rural town in which a lot of the students were the children of farmers and could be quite a challenge. I was only a few years older than some of them, and I was walking a very fine line between wanting to be liked and having some level of respect and authority. Something which every new teacher will remember. I had replaced a popular teacher and had been given his tutor group, home group, and they weren't making it easy for me. To be fair, I probably deserved it. One of the main protagonists was a boy whose father was a successful farmer who happened to be chair of the governors and who was always keen to protest when he wasn't happy with something. We'll call him SH, as those were his initials, and this was 40 years ago. The other person involved in this story is the head of year. I'll call him Geordie. He was an old timer who had been unsuccessful when applying for the deputy headship, and so there was a fair amount of resentment bubbling away, which he tended to take out on children and occasionally staff. Our school had a uniform policy. I didn't have a problem with this as such, as it does act as a bit of a leveler, especially when families can't afford the latest fashion, and as tutor, it was my job to make sure my children were appropriately dressed, which I was doing to the best of my ability. Anyway, many of the children were in basic uniform, but they sometimes pushed the limits of what was acceptable. A common problem was whether footwear was trainers or shoes. But as long as their appearance was within the spirit of the rules, I was pretty much okay with it. Geordie, however, was not. At a team meeting, he went on a rant about how standards were being allowed to slip and that we were not being vigilant enough. He reminded us that it was our job to maintain standards and ended with the demand that the next day we send to him any child who was not in proper uniform. He waved the school handbook at us and told us if we didn't know what that was, we could find it in there. I was well pissed. I was walking a fine enough line with these students, and this wasn't going to make my life any easier. Cue the malicious compliance. I checked the school handbook very carefully, and the next morning I was ready. After I had taken the register, I announced that anyone not in proper school uniform would be reporting to Mr. Geordie. Groans and protests. First of all, I sent a couple of troublemakers who were always pushing things too far, but then I began the malicious element. The regulation said black V-neck jumper. Yours has a round neck. Down you go. Is that a logo on your shirt? It says plain white here. Off you go. The regs also specified plain black socks. They had been written some years earlier and never reviewed. In the early 80s, many children wore white socks, I know. So down went all the white socks, and the atmosphere in the classroom got distinctly more hostile towards me. Then I singled out SH, the class mouthpiece. Down you go, I insisted. He was furious and came right up to me and was almost in my face. He demanded to know why, so I told him. He was wearing black socks, but I had noticed they had two colored bands around the top. I explained that the rule specifically said plain black socks and that his were not plain. He was mad, and our eyes locked, and then it happened. To this day, I remember how his face changed as he realized that this was not me against him. It was us against Geordie. He then went round the class helpfully pointing out all the minor infringements that I had missed, and we ended up sending every child in the class apart from 3 or 4 who were in full uniform and who were frankly disappointed not to be sent down. Geordie had gone hard on the first few children who went down and then couldn't treat the others differently, so he got it in the neck from parents who didn't appreciate being contacted about stripy socks. Shortly after this, the rules were rewritten to be more flexible as long as the spirit of the uniform was upheld. From that day on, I had a fantastic tutor group. SH became head boy and was a credit to the school and worked as hard for me as any child I taught since. And in 40 years of teaching, despite many instances of malicious compliance, I never managed to top the time my students collaborated with me in an act of malicious compliance. I was a bit worried about where the story went after reading the title, but who knew it would end in such a glorious alliance of student and teacher against a dastardly, overzealous school administration? I loved how SH was super ready to join the rebellion at the drop of the hat. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.